Ladies and gentlemen, what the fuck are Liverpool doing right now? What are they doing? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're moving like champions. They're moving like a team that want to go back to back, that want to retain the trophy, that clearly trust the manager that they have with Arne considering what he accomplished last season, winning the Premier League in his first season. Not only did he win the Premier League, he walked away with it. Liverpool were clearly the best team in England last season. They ran away with the league easily, finishing with 10 points ahead of Arsenal and when the league finished. Like, Liverpool were an incredible team last season, and Arne had little to work with when it came to transfers. He had nothing to work with when the transfers because he only brought in Federico Chiesa, who really didn't have much of an impact to them winning that Premier League or in general the great football that they were playing. You know, he had to rely on the players that he had, and he did amazing work with them. He did an amazing job with them, you know, getting the best out of some players and, you know, just always just continuing the level of other players like Mohamed Salah, who always puts ridiculous numbers, and yet again another ridiculous season from him last season. At one point he was a Ballon d'Or contender, with Virgil van Dijk showcasing why he's one of the best center backs in the world, and he was definitely the best center back in the world last season. And, you know, Alisson and all these other players, these other great players that he already had at his disposal. But of course, you would always want some backings, you would always want some depth, and he didn't really get that last season. You know, it's similar to Hansi Flick. You know, I'm a Barcelona fan, so I can really appreciate this. It's similar to Hansi Flick, who last season, he only made one signing with Dani Olmo, but besides that, he had to rely on the team that he had. And, you know, looking at the teams that they both have, they had great players, they had great teams, but, you know, just transmitting your ideas to them and convincing them to play that with such confidence on the pitch, it's never easy to do it in your first season. You know, usually it takes you some time, but with Hansi Flick, for example, and with Arne Slot last season, they just made it work instantly, and this is what great managers are made of. Of course, when you compare the likes of Hansi Flick and Arne Slot, Hansi Flick already has the experience because he's coached, you know, teams like Bayern Munich, you know, won it all with Bayern Munich, the national team of Germany. Arne Slot just randomly came from the Dutch league after coaching Feyenoord. You know, just Liverpool just signed them, and boom, he worked wonders. Something Jurgen Klopp was only able to do once in his whole entire Liverpool career. You know, it was unfortunate for him because he had to go up against basically Manchester City's dominance, you know, their era of dominance through the Premier League these last couple of years. And obviously last season, Manchester City just fell off a cliff. But it was just how easily Liverpool did it. And no one really guessed that Liverpool were really going to win the league the way in the manner that they did last season, which is, you know, truly impressive. Now, going into next season, obviously they're going to want to go back to back, and clearly this transfer window is showing that. The amount of money they've spent so far, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with them spending that kind of money considering their last transfer windows. They really haven't gone crazy. You know, Jurgen Klopp wasn't really back throughout these last couple of years, and Arne Slot obviously last season wasn't really backed at all. So, you know, obviously they have they can go out there and spend some money, and clearly they're spending big money on big players who are going to have an immediate impact when they join Liverpool, or, you know, they're currently right there, but when the season starts, with the likes of Ekitike, Florian Wirtz, Frimpong, like Kirky's from Bournemouth. Like, they're making great signings. They're making top level signings that will have an immediate impact, and, you know, some of these players are probably immediately going to get into the starting 11 already, like the likes of Florian Wirtz, who that was a statement signing for sure, because Florian Wirtz, we already know how much of a talented player he is. You know, there was definitely question marks at one point of his career when he had a, you know, very serious injury in his point of his career, and then, you know, people were questioning, hey, will we come back the same? And he did. I'm thinking it was an ACL injury, if I'm not mistaken, and he came back amazing. We saw what he did with Leverkusen, with Xabi Alonso being such an important player for them. You know, very versatile. You know, such a great player with the ball on his feet. You know, dribbling through everyone, just scoring goals as well. Great, you know, playmaker as well. They signed a top level player, of course, with the money they spent. Clearly, that they're showing why they wanted to sign him, because he's worth that much, right? You know, he's similar to, you know, that price tag isn't bad. You know, I'm a Barcelona fan, so I'm not going to complain about overspending on players, but, you know, it's not bad for a player, and considering how inflated the market is, it's not bad for Florian Wirtz for sure, but, you know, for sure he's going to be an immediate impact going into next season. We'll see if the pressure from the Premier League is going to, you know, get on top of him. You know, the pressure is going to go on him or not, but considering how much of a great player he is, I don't think so. I think he's going to do great things for them. And other players like Frimpong, another great player from, you know, Bayern Leverkusen, who essentially plays as a winger. You know, he's basically another winger. Defensively, he probably isn't the best, but, going that attack force you're basically getting for him. The way he's going to probably overlap and just play and connect with Mohamed Salah, getting more, freedom to Salah to invert a little bit more, getting more goals and, getting more assists. I think Frimpong will do great things for Liverpool as well. Ekitike, a talented player as well. People call him the baby Isak because, of his stature and, how great he is on the ball, technically gifted. He has confidence taking on players one-on-one. He can definitely play on the left-hand side as well. So they're bringing in players that can be, are very versatile and at the same time are going to improve the team that they currently have, because their team they currently have is already great. They already have a great team. Again, world-class talents all around the pitch with Mohamed Salah, Alisson, Van Dijk. You can maybe say some world-class players for other players that I wouldn't really consider, but I do rate them kind of very highly, like some McAllister, Konate. They have a great team. They have a great team to compete against any side, and this transfer window, how they're acting so far, is incredible for them. Now, the main news that's been coming out is Alexander Isak. The potential of Liverpool going for Alexander Isak. What? Alexander Isak is clearly the player that any team in the world would want as their striker. I'm a Barcelona fan. We have a 38-year-old up top. We have Lewandowski up top. Great player, world-class talent right there, but come on. Everyone would take Isak every day in a heartbeat. I would swap Lewandowski for Isak every day of the week. But, of course, considering the price tag, it's clearly impossible for Barcelona, but not for Liverpool. They want to go for him. Also, considering how they got rid of Luis Diaz for, a considerable amount. Like Bayern Munich spent 75 million on a 28-year-old, which is, for me, is pretty insane. But great business from Liverpool right there. So they clearly have the money to want to spend and get Alexander Isak. And if they do get him, I think it's done. I think they pretty much got the Premier League there. I think they pretty much are going to run away with the Premier League again, because that team is just overpowered. Arne plays great football, and they have depth all over the pitch. I think the only concern I would have with Liverpool so far is maybe their center backs. I don't think they're fully covered there with the likes of Van Dijk and Konate. Obviously, those two are an incredible duo. Van Dijk, again, just showing how world class he was last season, and Konate, he's a top center back. When I started seeing Real Madrid get linked to Konate because he's a free agent soon, I'm like, please don't, because Konate is a great player. Prone to getting booked almost every single game. That's something I've noticed throughout his career at Liverpool, that he usually gets booked. But besides that, he's a top center back. Now, when you consider the potential, because you can never, just not consider this, what if one of them gets injured? Who's going to replace them? When you look at their bench, they got rid of Quansah recently to Leverkusen, so they're missing him, who was a talented center back, and they pretty much only have Joe Gomez. Like, they really don't have anyone else. Joe Gomez, yeah, he's pretty good. As a substitute, he's pretty good. He's a good Premier League servant. But besides that, I wouldn't consider him top. I wouldn't consider him at the level anywhere near those two. And to play throughout a whole Premier League season or to play the important games, I really wouldn't trust Joe Gomez. So maybe that's something they should consider. At one point, they were linked to Guehi from Crystal Palace. I don't know if they're going to go for him anymore, because I haven't seen anything as of late. But if they do, that's good for them. But that's probably something they have to focus on a little bit more. But besides that, all around the pitch, they already have a great team to compete against any side. And for the Premier League, I think they could go back-to-back. Looking at the expectations for Liverpool next season, I can definitely see them going back-to-back. I'm pretty sure at this point, everyone has Liverpool as a favorite because of the team that they have and clearly what they accomplished last season. And considering the other teams in the league, like Manchester City were always considered favorites, but how they fell off last season, is looking like something that Pep Guardiola is going to have to, just get back and just try to rebuild this team and playing the style of football, that dominant style of football again, because he's lost a lot of key players throughout these last couple of years. And Arsenal are another team who have invested heavily. I think this season Arsenal have gone heavy as well when it comes to the transfer window. So they're going to be, definitely contenders for this Premier League, and they're going to want to go for that Premier League as well. So as much as I think Liverpool are definitely favorites and can go back-to-back, I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was last season, because a lot of these other teams are improving. When you look at Arsenal, City, Chelsea, kind of Newcastle, Tottenham a little bit, but looking at these other teams that usually wouldn't be a problem for Liverpool, usually wouldn't cause much danger or much concern, they're going to be a more concern next season, because these teams are improving. They've gone crazy in the transfer market, and they want to compete. They want to go for the title, not only just to compete for the Premier League, but for all the titles, considering how crazy they're going in the transfer market. And of course, at some point, you can't really say at the beginning of the season, oh, let's go for the treble, let's win the treble, because that comes down to how you do throughout the season. You know, if you start doing well by November, by December, by January, you're still in all the competitions, you're still seeing that you're still playing great dominant football, that's when you can start having treble talks. So none of these teams are going to have the aspirations to go for the treble. Obviously, they're going to have the mentality to try to win everything, right? But they're not going to have the main objective to win the treble until later into the season, where they consider that they're able to do it. But so far, at some point, they're going to prioritize only one trophy, and what's the biggest one that all of them can fight for? It's obviously the Premier League. So next season, Liverpool are definitely favorites, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was last season. So this is not only going to show how these investments are, great investments considering the amount of money they spend, which is a lot of money, but it's going to show how great Arne Slot is as well. Can he go back to back, which is never the easiest thing. To retain your trophy is never the easiest thing, especially when it comes to the Premier League. Now, when it comes to the expectations for the other trophies like the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, I think these are like trophies they should win. I don't think they should struggle with these kind of trophies because they already have a great squad. They have great depth. They should be winning these teams and these competitions, and considering the teams that they usually play. Like last season, they just fell short. They lost in the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle, which was, for me, I honestly wanted Newcastle to win because, just having that storyline of Newcastle winning it after so long without winning a trophy, it's a beautiful story. But Liverpool, they didn't play well that game. They did not play well in that final. And then in the FA Cup, losing to Plymouth, like, that should not happen. That should not happen with the team that you have. That should not be happening. And, of course, that also comes down to not having the depth. But I think they did kind of have depth to at least get far into those competitions, especially the FA Cup. But next season, those two competitions, those two domestic trophies, they should be at least getting to the final and lifting one of them at least, FA Cup or the Carabao Cup. They have to lift one of them. All the great teams go for all their trophies 100%, but one of these trophies they should be lifting minimum as well going into next season. Now, when it comes to European football, again, I've said this when I talked about Arsenal, when I talked about Real Madrid, when I talk about this, when it comes to European competitions in general, it's the same conversation you're having all the time. Anything can happen in European football. Literally 2 seasons ago, Borussia Dortmund got to the fucking final. They got to the final. So anything can happen in football. Anything can happen in European nights. Anything can happen, especially when you're playing home or away. Anything can happen in these special nights that we call the Champions League. So I'm not going to automatically say that Liverpool are the favorites. Hell no, definitely not, because there's a bunch of teams in Europe that are going to want to compete for this trophy and are going to go all out as well. Especially the teams when you consider some teams definitely want to win it, like look at the team behind me, like Barcelona. We want to go all out next season for the Champions League. As much as City, Bayern, Bayern spending $75 million for Luis Diaz. Come on, they already got their league in the bag. They're going to want to go for the Champions League because you can't spend that kind of money on Luis Diaz, who's 28 years old, and justify now winning or getting far into the Champions League. They need to do that. And obviously, when you have the likes of Real Madrid, who are always fighting for Europe, in Europe anything can happen. I think minimum for sure 100%, they have to finish top 8. Liverpool have to finish top 8. They did it last season pretty easily, and they had some difficult matches as well, and they got through it all. So minimum top 8, get straight to the round of 16, and do better and get into the semifinals. Again, spending this kind of money, you have to showcase why you spend this kind of money. The pressure is on. The pressure is definitely on. They need to justify why they spend this kind of money, because clearly they trust Arne Slot to do better next season and go for all the trophies, because not only did they spend this kind of money to just fight for the Premier League, no, they spend this kind of money to fight for all the trophies, to go all out, because last season, again, unfortunately for them, they finished top of the league table for the Champions League in amazing fashion, but unfortunately for them, they had to face PSG in the round of 16. That's just very unfortunate for them. You would consider, like, you would think you finished top of the league table and then you would face an easier squad, but no, they had to go up against PSG, and PSG just at that point just turned it on, went up another gear, and just were the best team in Europe at that point. But they're going to want to do better, and definitely I'd say minimum semifinals, try to get to the semifinals at least. Round of 16 they should get through. Now, of course, it always comes down to luck as well. The route that you get, you never know. But again, you can't justify spending this kind of money without getting far into a competition, or at least showcasing that you're one of the top sides in the world. You're playing the greatest football, like Barcelona were last season. Barcelona last season, no one expected them to accomplish what they did, but they did it, playing great football and getting far at least into the Champions League and into the semifinals. Of course, how we went out was very sad and unfortunate, and definitely mistakes that we have to fix in the future. But this is the expectation for these great teams, and Liverpool are one of the great teams. They won multiple Champions Leagues, and they also lost multiple Champions League these last couple of years. So they're going to have to want to get back. And when it comes to European football, so next season I would expect them at least get minimum to the semifinals. But the one thing I definitely expect from this Liverpool team is playing great football. That's the minimum I expect from this team, especially if they sign Alexander Isak. I expect great football, because when we look at the starting 11 they're probably going to go for next season, is going to be Alisson in goal. Right back here, in my opinion, I would, man, it's tough because they signed Frimpong. He was a great player, but I would trust Connor Bradley because he's been there now for a couple of years. I think it's his time to shine. When Connor Bradley started playing for Liverpool, you could just see the talent and say, all right, if Trent leaves, this guy's next up. He has to be next up. I think Connor Bradley is very balanced, great going forward, and defensively he's pretty solid as well. Frimpong, obviously the liability you get with Frimpong is defensively he isn't the greatest, but going forward he's amazing. Similar to Trent, Trent defensively isn't the greatest, but going forward he's a beast, he's a monster. Obviously not the same level as Frimpong, because again Frimpong is basically another winger, but it's going to come down to how Arne Slot decides, to play his football, because I do think with the signings that they made, and again, Alexander Isak potentially coming in, they're going to go for a very attacking approach, which is going to be, something that is going to be out of this world. Basically going back to that rock and roll football that Jurgen Klopp used to go and play with this Liverpool side. Just go and attack, just press, always fighting for the ball, always wanting to get goals, always just want to be the dominating team. I think with the signings that they made, this is the type of football Arne Slot is probably going to go for going to next season. So he might trust Frimpong. Let's just go and say Frimpong for now, but don't discard Connor Bradley. He is an incredible talent. Now, when it comes to center backs, obviously Virgil van Dijk and Konate, clearly the two center backs. Left back, Kirkies or Robertson. He's probably going to trust Kirkies at this point. Robertson, I think he's slowed down a little bit these last couple seasons, so maybe Kirkies on the left-hand side. Midfield, Gravenberch, McAllister, and Florian Wirtz, obviously. McAllister, incredible player. The ideal number 8 that any team would want. Again, considering the price tag that they got him for, which is very cheap for such a player. Amazing business from Liverpool right there. Gravenberch has improved massively on their Arne Slot, a player that Jurgen Klopp didn't really trust, or couldn't get the best out of him, and Arne Slot just like that got the best out of him, and he's doing great things in the midfield. That physical presence in the midfield that can win you balls, that is very confident on the ball, the type of player that you would want. And obviously Florian Wirtz, how versatile he is, how much of a great playmaker he is. He can go everywhere on the pitch and just do something for you. Obviously an ideal signing from them. And up top, Mohamed Salah on the right hand side. If he breaks 20 goals again, this guy is just serious conversations. I said at one point that I do consider him the best Premier League winger that the Premier League's ever had. If you want to argue with me and say Cristiano Ronaldo, go ahead. I wouldn't say that you're wrong there. But Premier League wise, Mohamed Salah is just another level. Putting up these kind of numbers all these years, insane. Up top, they're probably going to go for Ekatike, and then the left-hand side, maybe a Cody Gakpo, put a little Cody Gakpo there, or maybe put Florian Wirtz on the left-hand side and more little Slide in through the middle. They have attacking options. They definitely have attacking options. I think Liverpool selling Luis Diaz isn't the biggest mistake, but I think they're definitely losing a little bit of something. That fast-paced winger with great one-on-one abilities, who is very tricky. That ideal winger that you would want, right? Because Mohamed Salah, as much as he, does that occasionally, he isn't going to do that all the time, as much as Luis Diaz would have done that for you all the time on the left-hand side, always going at it as a winger, as a proper winger. I think they're losing that kind of player for sure, but again, the attacking options they have, and again, considering the wing backs that they're using right now with Frimpong and Kirkies or Robertson, going forward, I don't think there's going to be any problem when it comes to chance creation or any of that. So on the left-hand side, It's going to be interesting what Arne Slot decides to go with. But if Alexander Isak comes in, you could put Ekitike on the left hand side and then put Isak on the as their number 9. People were saying they're going to go playing like a 4-4-2, but of course formation doesn't matter. Like the starting formation doesn't matter. It's all about what the roles of the players are when they start the game, what they do on the pitch. They're going to go there, they're going to go here. It's going to be very interesting to see what Arne Slot does with his Liverpool squad. He has a lot of options to pick for, which is great. This is the kind of thing that you need when you want to win well for all the trophies. Have depth. This is something that I've been asking for Barcelona going into this transfer window. Go all out and get your depth. And Liverpool have clearly done that. Again, they pick a little positions when it comes to the center backs, but besides that, they've done great in this transfer window. So again, Premier League, they should go back to back. Domestic cups, easily at least win one of them. And European football, minimum try to get to the semifinals. Again, anything can happen. It comes down to luck as well. Anything can happen. So I won't knock them down for not getting to the final. But minimum get to the semifinal. But the main priority, play great football. Play great football. Play entertaining football. Be a top side. Be potentially the best team in the world. Barcelona didn't win the Champions League. But why did so many people consider us one of the best teams in the world? Because of the great football that we were playing. When you have these talented players as well who step up individually as well, which Liverpool had definitely invested in, with the players that they brought in, you have to show it. You have to showcase it, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what Arne Slot does next season. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys thought about the video. What do you guys think about Liverpool into next season? Are they going to easily win the Premier League? Are they going to, potentially get to the Champions League final? What do you think about the domestic trophies? Should they easily be winning that as well, considering the money they spent? Let me know all those in the comments down below. Make sure to like, subscribe, favorite, hit the notification bell for every time we upload. Share to your friends that love football. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Whenever that is, much love, take care, and peace.